You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that had, has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoy the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Future Tech and Future Tech Health podcast. I have Gavin Andrews. He's the managing director at HeartMath. The website is heartmath.co.uk. So, Gavin, thanks for coming. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Richard. Yeah, thanks very much. As you said, I'm the director of HeartMath in the UK. HeartMath is actually a US-based business, so the headquarters are over there, and I run the business for them under license in the UK and Ireland, and increasingly other bits of Europe popping up. So, yeah, that's our website in the UK, and the headquarters in the US is heartmath.com.
Okay, great. Excellent. And then, I've seen HeartMath at several conferences throughout the year. I've heard about heart rate variability, but I've never looked into it. So that's why I wanted to have you on. It seems like a trend that's, in the sports and the health world is becoming very big. So what is heart rate variability, to start off with?
Yeah, okay. Well, in simple terms, the heart rate variability is just the beat-to-beat changes in the heart rate. So it's the heart's rhythm, basically. The heart's always speeding up and slowing down. So even if you've got a resting heart rate sat there, Richard, of 60 beats a minute, your heart is not beating once every second. In fact, you'd be dead if it was. So what's really happening is it's just speeding up and slowing down, and that's based upon what's going on with the autonomic nervous system, what your body requires of your autonomic nervous system and your heart. And so it's a really interesting measure for looking at the dynamics of the autonomic nervous system, what it's doing, how activated it is or how relaxed it is, what the interplay is really between the branches of the autonomic nervous system.
So people's heart rates, I know if you get stressed or if you're sleeping or if you meditate or things like that, the heart rate changes. But what does the natural variability look like in a healthy versus an unhealthy person? And why do we think variability occurs?
Well, so what's healthy really depends upon the individual, their age and their gender. So as opposed to kind of giving you numbers around that, what I can say is that generally more is better than less. And so the reason we have variability really is just to enable us to respond to the demands of the day, whether that be running for the bus or whether that be sitting down digesting our dinner on the sofa as we watch TV. Just anything and everything throughout our day requires that our autonomic nervous system responds appropriately. And heart rate variability really is a window into that, and it's evidence that we've got the flexibility, the elasticity, if you like, to be able to deal with those challenges, both large and small. And really, when it comes to a stress reaction, this is an evolutionary thing. It means that the body is able to respond dynamically when we need to fight or run away or play dead or whatever it might be. That's when the heart rate variability becomes very, very important, and really you want more of it than less, because that's going to enable you to respond appropriately and basically survive if your life's in danger. But like I said, it's not always that extreme. It's just generally responding throughout the day. It's linked as well to circadian rhythms and breathing and metabolism, emotions, immune system. So everything really is connected and is feeding in, and the variability is a really, really strong and independent marker actually for health, both physical, physiological, and also psychological or mental health and resilience.
Well, okay, so if your heart rate couldn't vary, right, if you were under a physical strain, it couldn't accommodate, I guess it couldn't bring enough oxygen and blood to the muscles to be able, to let you perform, et cetera. But, going deeper, what is the function of heart rate variability in, every I guess, typical day-to-day function?
Well, yeah, that is its function, really. It's just to enable you to respond appropriately. So heart rate variability is really just a reflection or a measure of what's going on. So, yeah, based upon the demands around you, your heart needs to be responding appropriately. Your autonomic nervous system needs to be speeding up and slowing down appropriately, coming back to balance. So this is also connected to homeostasis, which you probably heard of, which is the body just regulating itself back to balance. So as a measure, it's useful both in real time to show us the dynamics of what's going on there and then. That's primarily what we use it for. But it can also be useful to track over time as well, to see within an individual the extent to which they're being depleted throughout the day. So how much sympathetic or kind of like accelerator activity have they got going on? And then how much parasympathetic or rest or digest activity have they got? So what we want to see, generally speaking, in the day is that there's balance between the two. And then what we do see in some individuals is that their heart rate variability is low, and that's a really good marker for the fact that they're getting a bit run down, overwhelmed, maybe even burnt out.
Why would their variability go down if they're getting run down?
Because basically the body is having to respond to repair them, so it's having to work extra hard. So if they've not been having enough sleep, for example, if they've been eating particularly well, then the body's under stress, and as the body's under stress, it's having to work harder and harder to bring itself back to balance. So generally that reduces HRV. So if we track people and we see their HRV declining over time, it can be a very good sign that they're getting too stressed and they need to rest, recuperate, back off. Occasionally you can see HRV leap up. It can even happen overnight, particularly with athletes. And what that shows is that they've overtrained. And so what's happening there is the autonomic nervous system has kind of been giving you some warnings for time, saying, hey, I'm being too challenged, your heart rate variability's gone down, you should be feeling a bit tired and maybe achy and not having sort of energy that you used to have. And then basically, if you don't listen to those signals from your body, then the body will act. And so what happens is the parasympathetic comes on hard. It's almost like it puts the brakes on really hard to say, hey, I've given enough warnings. Slow down now, time to relax. In fact, I'm going to force you to do it. So that can be one case where the heart rate variability suddenly becomes very high. But normally what we see when people are stressed is that it's lower than it should be or declines over.
What if you're, what if you're just sitting there, reading a book, or if you're talking to somebody, what does the heart rate vary, and, how much does it vary in typical people, even when they're not doing anything special?
Yeah, it should vary. So even while you're doing nothing, which might sound a bit counterintuitive, you might expect that the body should be really, efficient, and that therefore, if your heart is beating 60 times in a minute, that it should be beating once every second. So intuitively, that's what you would think would be optimal. But that's not the case. So it is always varying, even if you sat down reading a book. So like I'm a 47-year-old guy. I'm healthy. I practice what I preach. I exercise. I eat relatively healthy food. Everything in balance, etc. So if I was sitting down after our call, it's the evening here in the UK, reading my book, my heart rate variability might be ranging anywhere between kind of 50 and maybe 70 beats, just as I'm sat there. So the variability in that sense would be a range of 20 beats. I'm healthy for my age, but we want to be seeing some variability even when people are sat down at rest. Now, in real time, I could influence that by breathing deeply, by holding my breath, by having stressful thoughts and feelings going into my system. That's going to impact on it as well. So it's not like HRV the amount of HRV you've got is a rigid or set thing. That's not the case at all. But yeah, to your point, even when you're sat down, relaxing, doing nothing, your heart rate is always speeding up and slowing down. Basically, it's there to facilitate everything the body needs to do with regards to the repair process, homeostasis. And it's there actually doing that in case you need to respond dynamically. So I could be sat reading my book, very, very relaxed, heart rate's nice and low. But then there could be a loud noise outside. A car might backfire, or someone might bang on my window or whatever, and I might have a shock. Well, if I don't have the variability, if I don't have the elasticity and the flexibility, then I can't respond. And actually, in a worst case scenario, if I didn't have a lot of variability, I could even have a heart attack with a shock like that. So, this is really what's going on. It's just the body's way of keeping itself flexible and adaptable so that it can respond appropriately to any need that we pose.
So what's a typical variability, for someone that's sedentary versus an athlete? Their ranges that
okay. Well, this is kind of tricky territory, and I don't want to be giving numbers out which then concern people. But okay, as a 47-year-old guy, if my variability, and there's look, Richard, there's like 40 odd different measures of variability as well. So I use a very simple measure, which is simply kind of max min in terms of the heart rate. So as a 47-year-old guy, if my max min was only kind of like 2, 3, 4 beats or something like that, that would indicate that I'm not very healthy. Whereas someone who's doing, endurance sports, is a really accomplished cyclist, distance runner, triathlete, something like that, they could have a variability of 20, 25, 30 beats. So, it's different for different people. There's a genetic component. It does vary in the moment. Just having a coffee or something like that, or eating certain types of foods can impact upon it. But generally speaking, more is better than less. And we know from all the science and the research that if you have less than you should have for your age and gender, that does not bode well for your health.
So you said there's more than one way to measure it instead of just, what are some of the ways that it's measured, and what do those ways mean?
Well, so in the simplest sense, the way that heart rate variability is measured, we call RR intervals or NN. So basically, you're measuring the gaps between the heartbeats, to put it in simple terms. And then there's lots of different ways of crunching that data, different algorithms and formulas that can be used. So typically, we have different measures like in the research, SDNN, RMSSD. And so, depending on the application, researchers tend to use those types of numbers, and some of the apps that we see on the market, they're using those types of approaches, measurements of HRV in the background, but then they're often creating their own numbers around that. So you may have heard of like Elite HRV and iThlete, people like that. They tend to have their own proprietary number. So that after a while your number ranges kind of between 70 and 75 or something like that, but that number's actually being calculated using some of these other research measures. And our RMSSD is a popular one. That's basically a measure of the parasympathetic. That's not what we do. It's not what HeartMath is really interested in. We're not primarily about HRV. HRV is just a way of measuring a state that we help people learn how to get into, an optimal state called coherence. So just to clarify, HeartMath is we're not really an HRV business. We're not really a technology business as such. We're a transformation business. We help people learn how to increase their self-awareness and regulate their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, their behaviors, and the state that we help people learn how to create or to access can actually be measured with HRV. So it's kind of almost, in fact, in many ways, the HRV side of things is an accident for us. We as a business, developed these different, very simple self-regulation techniques way back in the 1980s. We founded the business in 1991, and as a training company, we're teaching these techniques before we even realised that heart rate variability was something that could be used to measure what it was we were creating. So we're a bit different to everyone else. The heart rate variability data that you might get in your Apple Watch or your Fitbit, or that you might be deriving from a chest strap if you're using Elite HRV or iThlete, those types of apps, they're different to what we do. I use them myself. They're great measures, but primarily they're for checking in with yourself to see each day, how am I doing? How's my battery? Have I drained my battery too much? Is it nice and topped up? So the main applications are, for sport and readiness to train and all of those types of things, really useful for those types of applications. But that isn't primarily what we're about. In fact, it's not what we're about at all. What we're about is practicing a very simple technique that facilitates putting your autonomic nervous system into balance, and that enables you, with practice, to develop a level of self-awareness and an ability to self-regulate your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So if I'm, I get the tools, and if I'm stressed, it'll teach me ways to relieve that stress much quicker than I otherwise would have before. I'll do some sort of exercise or breathing or thinking or combination of those two, and I should be able to, let's say, slow my heart or increase the variability or improve some kind of metric pretty quickly by doing it. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's what we're using our technology for. So the techniques are based upon, first of all, focusing out of the head and into the body, so particularly focusing around the heart area itself. Regulating the breathing, so we have a balanced breathing technique, and the balanced breathing is basically, it's kind of hacking into the autonomic nervous system, and so you're putting you're consciously taking control of the autonomic nervous system, you're putting it into balance. So the balanced breathing is activating the sympathetic and the parasympathetic in balance, so they're synchronizing, and then once you've done that, that's a great way to just begin to stop stress in the system. And then when you've done that, you can then shift the feelings or the emotions. So you can, for example, recall people or things that you feel appreciation or gratitude or care or love or whatever. So you've taken control of your autonomic nervous system, then you start to impact upon the hormonal system, and all of this information that the heart is creating and sending to the rest of the body, the brain in particular, is then resulting in having more activity in the prefrontal cortex. So therefore, if you're stressed and you do this, you get the activity back in the prefrontal cortex. You can begin to think much more logically, rationally, objectively, do all the wonderful skills that you, as human beings, we can do, like empathize and be creative and innovative. And so, yeah, it's something that we train people to do, and we advocate that they do. On the one hand, kind of like a meditation. So there's a dedicated practice that you do each day for 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. And then also throughout the day as an eyes open in the moment technique. So as soon as you're stressed, whether in a business meeting and colleagues are disagreeing with you or whatever, or having an argument with your partner, or you might be stuck in a traffic jam, getting stressed about getting somewhere, then these techniques are designed also to be used real-time eyes open.
So what have you tried? What kind of techniques, and has it been surprising to you? Like, what's an experience you've had that you thought was really cool or super helpful to you?
So for me, my daily practice is I do 21 minutes practice a day of a technique we call heart locking. So the 21 minutes thing is just because someone told me that it takes 21 days to create a habit. So I challenged our community to do 21 minutes for 21 days. But anyway, they then told me it was 60 days, so I carried on doing it. But for me, what that's all about is I'm spending dedicated time each day where I'm really focusing inside myself. It's a reflective practice, and what I'm doing is I have my attention in my heart, I'm regulating my breathing so it's nice and smooth and sustained. There's an equal volume flowing in and flowing out, and then I'm focusing my feelings around generally people for me that I appreciate or care for, people that I feel compassion for. A part of that practice is radiating those feelings out to others, and then on the in-breath breathing them for myself. So it's not massively dissimilar from the compassion meditation or the metta meditation that Buddhists might do or whatever. But I'm using the technology while I'm doing that to track the numbers, to see how coherent I'm getting, because there's degrees of coherence and balance within the autonomic nervous system. And then so I find that the numbers are really useful because they also let me know how I'm doing each day. They keep me real in terms of what it is I think I'm feeling or experiencing. And I like the fact that I can look back at data over extended periods and then work out how I'm doing, how I've been developing, periods in my life when I'm getting better at it, or times when it's more challenging.
Well, what have you noticed specifically as you've done it, over time? I mean, what was it like in the beginning? What was it like after a few weeks of it? What did you notice?
Okay, so I've been doing it for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
What I can say to you is that I used to be a very stressful person. I used to get very anxious about my work, my performance at work. I used to catastrophize situations and relationships. I used to regularly be ill in terms of bugs and colds and flus and things like that, which I'm pretty certain in hindsight was down to the fact that I was spending quite a lot of my time stressed. So when I discovered HeartMath, I've been into lots of different things and tried lots of approaches. But when I came across it, what I loved was the simplicity. And what I noticed very quickly was that I could create calm within myself, both physically and mentally, very, very quickly, just within the space initially of a minute or two of the breathing practice. And then what I thought was really cool was the fact that I could, in effect, choose how I wanted to feel. And, until that time, I'd sort of been on autopilot, just feeling what I was feeling based upon what was going on around me or whatever popped into my head. It hadn't really occurred to me that I might have some choice around what I feel and when I feel it. So the fact that I could just, take a pause on the day and intentionally focus on appreciation or gratitude or whatever, I found that to be extremely enjoyable. And over time with practice, and, this stuff's not magic. You dedicate yourself to it, you put the time in, but it doesn't need a lot of time in my experience. Put the time in and it begins to have an impact. And so what I found over time was I was just getting less stressed. It was almost like the bar was being raised on what was required to stress me. I was just hooked. I was convinced it worked, and that's why I carried on doing it. So I actually was practicing all this stuff a good few years before I even got involved in the business.
Do you notice that you're a different person? You're a lot calmer, and you don't have these issues you had before?
Absolutely, yeah. It's it's a wonderful thing. I notice. It's been a long time since I had any gaps in my practice now. But what I also noticed back then was if for whatever reason I stopped practicing, which I tended to do when life was good and I was feeling good, it's almost like you just think, well, I don't need to do this now because everything's fine. And then sure enough, it's like a muscle, and as the muscle gets a bit weaker, the old patterns begin to creep back in again, or, the craziness of life starts to trigger you again, and the tolerance level for stress goes down. So yeah, for sure, I am, obviously I'm the same person in many ways, but I'm a different person in terms of my outlook on life, the situations I choose to put myself in. I give myself a lot more self-care and compassion for what I do and the decisions I make and the work that I do, and generally enjoy life a lot more. I mean, even to the extent of things like, sport. I'm a very, very amateur triathlete. And in the past, I recognised I never even really used to enjoy it a lot of the time because I was just pushing myself so hard every time I trained to be faster, or I had to, compete and beat my friends or always beat my previous time or whatever. And actually, I wasn't really enjoying myself. Whereas now, I just do it for the sake of doing it. I listen to my body a lot more. I enjoy the experience and the process of the training and enjoy the competition days much more as well. So it's just a different way of being.
That's great. Yeah. So what's the protocol for new people that want to, work on HeartMath? Do they start with a device and then they do training with the device, or they do training first on their own? How do people onboard?
Yeah. So the simplest way to onboard is there's quite a lot of free information online anyway in terms of the technique. So the US site, HeartMath.com, and our site, HeartMath.co.uk, there's some stuff on there which just can kind of get you up and running. Next thing to do, if you want to dip your toe into the water, is we've written a number of books. So we've got a book called Transforming Stress, which is particularly good in terms of helping people understand the physiology of stress and also then how it's impacting on the brain, and then explaining some of the HeartMath techniques and how and why they work and what HRV is. So, that's the price of $10, $15 for a book. And then the next step up from that is the biofeedback technology. So the biofeedback tech is $159 in the US, £159 in the UK, and that is kind of like a Fitbit for the emotions, really. It's just a little sensor, Bluetooth sensor, goes on the earlobe, clips on clothing, goes Bluetooth to your phone, and it's specifically measuring heart rate variability coherence. So it's not measuring those other types of heart rate variability that some of those other devices measure, for sport or whatever. We're specifically and solely interested in coherence, and we're interested in measuring it real time so that when you practice the techniques, you can see the impact that you're having through the heart rhythm. You can see the levels, the degrees of coherence that you are achieving in the session. So that's the level. And then, within the app itself, there's all sorts of instructions, guided meditations, videos of how to use the technology and what the metrics and all that type of. And then really the next step up from that is people who want to use this system with others. So I just finished actually on Friday delivering one of our coach programs. So we train people to be coaches in the HeartMath system. And they could be sports coaches, they could be educators, they could be medical professionals. I had a cardiologist on the last one actually. Hockey coach we had. People who are like business coaches, consultants, trainers, so all sorts of different people who just recognise that this is actually a very, very simple skill, and that the skills of awareness and self-regulation are extremely valuable no matter what you do, no matter who you are, whatever walk of life. And so we train people to go out there and share these techniques and the coaching models and protocols with others, the people in the worlds that they're experts in or that they have a passion in.
Okay. Yeah, that's wonderful. So, all right. So the best way for people to take the first step is to, go to heartmath.com or heartmath.co.uk, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And, get in touch through there or just drop us an email at either of those addresses, info@heartmath.com or info@heartmath.co.uk with any questions or anything, and we can get back and let people know what their options are.
All right, that's great. Well, Gavin, I don't have the heart to tell you that we're out of time. Just kidding.
Okay.
We're out of time. But thanks so much for coming. It's been super useful, and I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Richard.
You're listening to the Future Tech Health Podcast with Richard Jacobs. Until I reached age 40, I never realized the obvious, that we all have medical issues, or we at least have a family member or close relation that has, or will have them in the future. Medicine and biological systems are the final frontier. Until we've conquered death, figured out how life began, cured cancer, and understood our purpose in the universe, there's a heck of a lot to talk about when it comes to our health. Future Tech Health means I'll be covering futuristic topics that are actually already in clinical trials, or even starting to appear on shelves or by prescription, or available for your own use. We dive deep into stem cells, CRISPR-Cas9, the science of sleep, epigenetics, medical testing, cancer, ketogenic diets, stem cells, aging, regenerative medicine, and more. My goal for you, the listener, is to learn from these podcasts. You may very well learn something that may change the course of your life for the better, steer you towards a new career, or give you insight into addressing a serious medical problem. Remember, however, this podcast and its content is informational in nature only. No medical, tax, legal, financial, or psychological advice is being given. If you enjoyed the podcast, please listen, subscribe, like, and share it with friends. Thank you.